Welcome, Kim Sor, joining us from Ireland, Philippe from Canada. This is the second repetition of the event. So yesterday we've had a session in the morning with colleagues joining us from Asia and Africa. So we are expecting maybe more participants today joining us from the Americas. Okay, let's start slowly. So welcome again, everyone. My name is Alexandra Atalla, and I'm the Program and Knowledge Management Analyst working with UNDP's Food and Agricultural Commodity Systems community, known as the FACS community. So our event today is on developing an innovation mindset in food systems. This is the first session. We will have the second one next week. This event will be delivered by Ben Elers. Ben is the founder of the Brain Innovation Project. Some of you may know Ben already through last year's coaching program. And also Ben, throughout the last 2-3 years, has worked closely with the FACS community and has delivered several workshops and events. A few things to note. We are recording this event. This is for the needs of the event. We will be sharing the recording with you participants and anyone who has registered. And also considering the nature of this event, this is not a webinar. This is more of a practical, interactive workshop. We would encourage you, of course, if your internet connection allows you to have your cameras on throughout the event, if it's possible, of course. Also, another thing to note, please feel free, throughout the workshop, if you have any questions or comments, just feel free to put them in the chat box. I will be looking at the chat box, or you can raise your hand. So we want to make it as, interactive as possible. So without further ado, I'm handing over to Ben. Thank you, Ben, for joining us today. And I hope you all enjoy the next almost 2 hours together. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Lovely to see some names. I can't see many faces, but some names of people who we know each other well, and lovely to meet people who I haven't met before. As well as putting your hand up or putting questions in the chat box over the next 2 hours, feel free just to interrupt. Right? If something doesn't make sense, just jump in, make a comment, ask a question. Totally fine. We don't need to be too formal about this. Right? I just to first start off, just a bit of an overview of what we will be doing. As Alexander says, there's two sessions. The first one is more, I wouldn't say theoretical, but it's really about trying to introduce concepts, right? And I think important concepts. And so there's much more of me presenting and talking. The second one is entirely practical, right? It's all about tools and techniques and exercises. But we could have just jumped into the tools and techniques, but they don't really make sense without the context and the background as to where we're going. So today it's a little bit more about me talking, but hopefully there'll be interaction, and please jump in at any time. And next week we get to some of the exciting, fun tools which we can use. And by the end, basically, I hope that you'll have not only tools and techniques, but actually an appreciation of your own innate creativity and innovation. Innovation. Why innovation? I don't really want to spend too much time on this. I think we all know that the world is changing pretty dramatically, whether it's geopolitics, um, climate change, funding, business model for this kind of work in food systems. We need new ideas, new innovation, and so I don't want to spend too much time talking about the importance of innovation. I guess people are already pretty familiar with that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, I assume, as well. And why the brain? The reason it's responsible for everything we think, feel, believe, say, hear, or do. And if we accept that, then obviously this is important or critical even in terms of how we think about the future, how we make decisions about the future, how we innovate. Briefly, we all have a notion of what innovation is, but a more formal definition is it's not just about new ideas, although new ideas and novelty are important. It's also about the introduction of something new, right? So it's not just a mental process. It's actually about introducing something, making changes to our processes or methods or devices. And these two components are really important for innovation. So it's not just about coming up with a crazy idea like the answer to sustainable food systems is to, I don't know, put concrete on land or whatever. It's about practical solutions. Um, but obviously, in this workshop, people come from different countries, different projects, different organizations. So we can't be talking too much about the introduction of stuff. We're going to be talking more about the creativity aspect of it. Um, and I'm going to use the terms creativity and innovation interchangeably, even though they're not exactly the same thing. Okay. And as I say, just feel free to jump in at any time if that doesn't make sense, or if I'm talking too quickly. So I get excited about this stuff, right? So I might talk too quickly. Also, of course, you're all food systems change agents, but we're not talking about the thematics in this workshop. And so if you're thinking, okay, I would like to know about innovation in private sector engagement, um, you're possibly in the wrong workshop, right? I mean, hopefully, if this is your area of work, private sector engagement, you will get tools and insights which you can use, but we're not focusing on the thematic areas. Rather, we're focusing on an innovation mindset, how we use our brains, the cognition, the in fact, innovation almost as a way of life rather than just as a technical issue. Okay. And so I really won't be offended if somebody sort of like says, oh, okay, I thought we were going to be talking about innovation techniques for integrated landscape management. I will not be offended if somebody leaves and goes, oh, that was what I thought we were going to be talking about. We are talking about our brains and the way we make choices and see the world. Also, when you think of innovation, quite often it's thought of as a process to be managed in an organization, like design thinking down here, or techniques for brainstorming, for practical tools and techniques which we can use to be more innovative, processes. That's not what we're talking about here today. We're talking about innovation as a mindset, innovation, the way we can think creatively and have new ideas and see the world differently. Okay. A couple of other comments about innovation before we move on. We innovate in all sorts of ways. Some of it can be very methodical. It can be involved testing in a science lab for years and years and years and years and years. That's innovative. Are people familiar with Archimedes? Right, he was ancient Greek philosopher, mathematician, um, one of those typical Greek polymaths who could, excel in all sorts of areas. And he was tasked with finding out how much gold was in the king's crown, right? But he didn't know how to measure the the volume of a king's crown. So, and he couldn't figure out how to do it, but he was having a bath, so the story goes. He was having a bath one day, and he realized that if he put the crown in the water, then the water level would move up a little bit, and that would give him the volume of the crown, right? And very excited by this, he had a eureka moment. And apparently, according to legend, jumped out of the bath and shouted down, ran down the street naked, shouting, Eureka, Eureka, I've got it, I've got it. We might also call them aha moments, right? But this notion of sudden insight on the one hand and methodical testing on the other, they're both innovation, right? And things in between. We're not talking about one or the other in particular. It's more of a general approach. Another thing about innovation and aha moments is there's a popular myth that somehow creativity it will just come in insights out of the blue, but that's not really the case. Innovation and creativity, it comes generally within people's existing areas of expertise, right? It's so, for example, Frida Kahlo was not going to discover, or write down theories of relativity, and Einstein was not going to do self-portraits, right? So creativity and innovation, it's about being creative, but it's also you're creative within your field or existing knowledge to some degree, or to a large degree. You need the knowledge base to be creative, right? When we talk about being creative, we can't be creative and innovative on demand, truly innovative on demand, right? It comes at unexpected moments, unexpected places. What we can do is we can try to incubate it. We can try to put in place or use some tools and techniques which are likely to increase the possibilities to be innovative and creative. Right? So I can't guarantee you from this workshop that you will come out with any insights. I assume you will. I hope you will, particularly in next week when we do this practical tools and techniques. But it's more this. We're talking more about the processes which are likely to increase the chances of more creative and innovative ways of thinking. And also innovation in this workshop, at least, we're not seeing innovation or creativity as just something you do, but I really hope by the end of this time together that you actually feel inspired that innovation and creativity, it's a way of life. It's a way of being. It's a way of thinking. It's much more than just something you do. To be or not to be, that is the question. Where does that come from? Somebody, I'm sure somebody's heard of this. Come on, don't be shy. This is the easy part. Nobody's ever heard of to be or to not to be? That is the question. Of course you have, right? Shakespeare, right? And to be or not to be, that is the question. Is that creative? Well, historically, it was very creative. Right? I mean, the fact that that we can still recall this hundreds of years later, even if you're, I admit this is a culturally specific example, but the fact that we can still record it hundreds of years later shows that there was something quite important about this historical figure. Now, if I say over the dinner table, to be or not to be, that is the question, I'm not being creative, right? I'm just being boring and trying to be funny, right? And so creativity, it kind of depends on the context. It's not just about the outcome. Yeah, it's quite important, this. If my daughter, on the other hand, and I use this photo with her permission, if my daughter comes home from school and has never heard of Shakespeare or anything and says to be or not to be, that is the question, she's probably not being historically creative. Nobody's going to remember that she said it in 500 years' time. But for her, she's being very, very creative within her space, right? So she's being psychologically creative, right? Within her area, it's actually very creative, even though it's not historically creative. We're talking about this here, right? We're not expecting that after these tools and techniques tomorrow that you all go away and write global hits which are played on radios throughout the world, right? We're talking about here food systems, but also as people. So it's important not to, if you're, one of the things is that people often say, I'm not a creative type. Right? It depends on who they're comparing themselves to. Right? And it's really important within creativity and innovation that you pick the right comparison, because otherwise, if you pick Shakespeare or Shakira or whatever, you're probably not going to match up. Right? So we're talking about your creativity on your terms, not creativity as an objective thing. Is there a creative type? We all want to know, are we creative? Are we born creative? This is what Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who's known for flow, probably many of you have heard of it, this psychological concept. He did a lot of the study of creativity. And he basically, as is said here, creative people tend to be people with contradictions, right? It's actually in the contradictions where people find the space for developing new ideas, different ideas within the same people or personality types play off each other and create new opportunities. I'm not sure how useful that is, because everybody I've ever met has a lot of contradictions, right? And hands up, most certainly me, right? And then just because you have contradictions, it also doesn't mean you're creative, unfortunately. Now, just to end this introductory section, here's the basic paradigm that we're going to be exploring in today and next week. Is anybody familiar with this? The exploitative, the explorative paradigm? People not come across it? It's a it comes out of originally, I think, out of animal behavior, foraging. Foraging means sort of like when animals hunt for food or try to, or squirrels find nuts or lions hunt within their area. The basic premise is, do you exploit what you already know, right? So a lion hunting within its existing area, or do you explore new areas, right? It's this basic trade-off. Or if in terms of humans, if you go out to a restaurant, you know, decide you're going to go out for a restaurant with friends, do you go to the one that you already know and you like? In other words, you exploit your existing knowledge, or do you explore a new restaurant, right? One is not better than the other, but they're different. Here, you know what you're going to get. Here, you don't know what you're going to get, and it might be better, it might be worse, right? And so this is more risk. This is what you know, and what you know, it might be great one time, but as the environment changes, it might no longer work. So, for example, a lion might be hunting in the same area year after year after year, but if all of a sudden there's a drought, right, or there are no animals there, exploiting the existing knowledge is not going to work. You'll need to explore new things. Same with all sorts of businesses, right? They have a product which works very, very, very well, and that's where they put all their investment into it. But then all of a sudden, the market conditions change dramatically, and the exploiting their existing product no longer works, right? And so you need a combination of both exploiting your and hopefully that company, it needs to be exploiting its existing thing, but also exploring alternatives. So it's not about one is better than the other, but it's about having the ability to shift between these two areas. And this is what we're going to be talking about mainly in this workshop. Any questions so far? Does this make sense? You're like, what was this all about? Or is this what you expected? Or comments, questions?
Hi, Ben.
Hi.
Hi. I just wanted to say, it is something that I expected. I love that we're exploring something that is domain general, and I think it's something that's needed. But I was just wondering, you mentioned a lot. You brought up the idea of knowledge a lot. You know, knowledge in different domains. I'm just wondering, just so that I orient myself over the rest of the sessions and the next session. Um, will there be a venture into more embodied knowledge, non-analytical realms of knowledge and all that?
This is this is exactly where we're going.
It's beautiful.
It will be yeah, no, this is it's I'm trying to think, is it 99% that or 100%? Right? I mean, this is the direction we're going. Yeah. It's, you know, you're all experts here, right? In your areas, you have your existing knowledge. This is fantastic, and I don't want to put this down, but we're going to be talking about what you don't know rather than what you do know, right? I mean, and that's going to be about embodied knowledge, and yeah, exactly. I love it when people anticipate where we're going, because it kind of it seems it then it seems that the logic makes sense. So that's good. Any other comments or questions? Okay, then I think just before we move on to talking about the brain a little bit, Camilla or Alexandra are going to Oh, I should actually, I'm going to just share these questions first. Maybe that's the best thing to do. And so just on this point, yeah, so we're focusing on this in this workshop mainly on what we don't know. And this is a key thing for innovation and creativity, not what you do know, right? I mean, what you know, you already know. Innovation and creativity by definition is what you don't know and what you're not doing, right? But we're going to be asking these questions through Menti. So I think you're going to need your phones, which people tend to have right by them 24 hours a day. Looking at these three questions, how creative and innovative do you consider yourself? Identifying a food system area, where would you like to be more creative or innovative? But also, importantly, we use the same brain whether we're working as food system agents or we're cooking the dinner, all right, or taking kids to school or whatever. And so I would also encourage you in the third area, third question, to think about, is there an area of your life which isn't necessarily related to food systems, but is an area that you might want that where you would like some new ideas and creativity, right? And you don't need to share these, with your name. These are all confidential, personal things, so that's important. So, Alexander, over to you.
Thank you, Ben. So Camila will share the instructions in the chat box, and I will share my screen. Second. Okay. So you will be able to join either using the QR code, or you can use normally the website and put the code, or there is a link that will take you to the questions. So the first question is, how creative and innovative do you consider yourself to be? And we have 4 responses so far, 5. So we have 10 responses, almost everyone responded, and it seems it's 6.4, Ben.
Okay.
I think yesterday we've had 7.4, but we had a larger group. So the second question is, what is one professional from the food systems area where would you like to be more creative? And you can type your responses here. So it's interesting because we have lots of responses that are related to more the processes engaging different stakeholder, multi-stakeholder processes. But we do have some that are more, let's say, technical, specifically related to financing regenerative agriculture, enhancing agroecology initiatives, agricultural cooperatives. So similar also to the answers we've been receiving yesterday. So there were on the process side and then more technical ones. I think we've had also yesterday various that were related specifically to monitoring, evaluation, and learning and impact. So that was also a big bucket. Production, generally food systems. Perfect. So 10 answers. Maybe we can move to the third question, which is related to other areas of life and work outside of food systems where you would like to be more creative. So we have also like similarities looking at yesterday's answer. I think one thing that didn't come up yesterday, but usually comes up a lot during those type of workshops is like stress management and well-being. So we have it here today. But yes, lots of people interested in, you know, developing new skills, like in terms of painting, yeah, wealth management, optimism, investing, and also family related things. So we also had that yesterday. Thank you everyone for participating in this Menti. And over to you, Ben, for any comments on the answers that we've received.
Very interesting. And as you say, just this both the process stuff in terms of the food systems, more the, you know, the engagement with people, but also the technical, the areas. And the important thing is for you to bear this in mind, particularly next week when we're doing the exercises, that this is the areas that you would just to have in the back of your mind that these are the kind of the topics that you're using when doing the exercises or any other exercise. I do think though that the whole point, Kim Saw, I think that's how you pronounce your name, yeah. That's your point about this is generic, right? These are these, as I say, we're using the same brain whether we're doing technical stuff or with more process, and so hopefully there'll be relevance for both. And very interestingly as well, the same with the other area of non-food systems, both the practical, the painting, doing something, writing, the creativity, but also the being aspect of it. So it's the doing, the painting and the writing, but the being, how with stress, personal well-being, and one which is critically important, optimism. All right. I mean, it was interesting to see that whoever said that. It's a big issue, and we could have, in a sense, we could have taken this workshop and done it around any one of those topics. Because as I was saying, and I would keep on repeating this, I don't want to bore you, but I think it's really important that we're using the same brain, whatever we're doing, and the same basic processes are there, whether you're talking about stakeholder engagement, stress management, or painting. Right? This is the thing that we're using the same processes. 6.4. So you don't have a high opinion of your creativity, you lot. And as we will see, actually, our self expectations are massively important. right? I mean, and I don't mean this in terms of some new age where you've got to believe in yourself. I mean that it's really becoming increasingly demonstrated through understanding how the brain works, that our self expectations, well, we'll see in the next section, are hugely important, right? Because the way we see the world is the way we see the world is actually the way we see ourselves in the world. But this will become a bit clearer, hopefully, over the next 20 minutes or so. Any other comments or questions from anybody? Any other observations? There's one who's apologizing for, two. Oh, I'm sure that's not the case. I'm sure that's not the case. Maybe you got Edda says she got she gave it a pathetic 2. Maybe you didn't read the question right and you meant to give it an 8 or something.
No, I did. I did read it well.
Anyway, okay, so we know who the person is to blame, which is always good to know up front. Anyway, I'm going to carry on. I want to in this workshop, when thinking about it, we could have just jumped into the exercises about creativity and we can do all the fun stuff there and then. But if we did this, we're not really understanding how our brains work and how our minds work. And I think if we want to move beyond creativity and innovation as just something we do every now and again when we get an hour's spare time, right? In terms of we want to see creativity much more in terms of a mindset, a way of life, a way of thinking. It's critical to understand the underlying processes, right? Not just go on to let's be practical. What are the exercises? So today we're really spending quite a lot of time understanding or discussing some of the fundamental drivers as to what's happening. Because if we don't really understand how we make sense of the present, then it's a bit difficult to know how we make sense of the future. Okay, so that's the reason why I will be kind of talking a little bit more. But please do interrupt at any time if you have any questions or comments. Yeah. So we talked a bit about innovation, but now we want to talk about the brain. I think, Kimsor, you used the word embodied knowledge. I think you did, didn't you? Yeah. This is exactly what it is. Why embodied brain? Have people heard of embodied cognition, embodied brain? Does anybody know what, is this a concept which people are aware of? Why not just brain? Well, here, artificial intelligence, everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, but here we're talking about biological intelligence, right? Our biological capacity for innovation. And that's our brains. And this section is based on a lot on the work of Carl Friston, he's not a household name, but he's kind of the neuroscientist's scientist. Right? If you go into any neuroscience department anywhere in the world, or pretty much anywhere in the world, they're all using his frameworks. It's very, this guy is very his work is incredibly important, right? And this is based on our modern understanding of the brains. This next section, although we're going through it in about 10 minutes, it really does represent our cutting edge modern understanding of how our brains work. We know a lot about the brain. You've all seen brain scans and, sorry, excuse me, I just need to cough. We've all seen brain scans and there's so much knowledge about the brains. But what put very simply, his basic theories are, and this is not just a theory, but it's also tested empirically, is that this is what brains do. They operate to minimize their uncertainty or surprise between their pre-existing model of the world and the world itself. Right? Sounds simple, right? Not particularly surprising, maybe, but it has quite profound implications. And I should just emphasize at this point, uncertainty or surprise can be positive or negative, right? It's not always just a bad thing. So here's the embodied part of it. Your brain was not developed throughout hundreds of millions of years of evolution of brains and of multicellular organisms and 4 billion years of evolution of life. It wasn't developed in order for you to participate in a webinar or a workshop on innovation and creativity in food systems. Your brain exists your embodied brain to keep you alive. And this is where it comes from. And if we don't understand our brains within this context, within their biological context, it just doesn't make any sense, right? They came from somewhere. And they have to basically secure resources and avoid threats in the external world and keep you internally functioning. Right? This is what brains do at a very high level. But unfortunately, or fortunately, is our brains are sealed within a box. They don't have access to the world. Right? They're within our skull, and all they receive is basically signals: vision, sound, smell, taste, touch, in the case of electricity, right? Electrical signals. Internally, they receive chemical signals, hormonal signals, electrical signals, and all of this, they have to make sense of the world. And all of this, it sounds theoretical, but that's because our brains do such a remarkable job that we think of it as that our brains actually experience the reality like a video camera as of the world itself. It's just not true. Right? Our brains have to create our internal understanding of the world based on incredibly sparse data or simple data. And it's quite remarkable. Right? How do they do this trick? Well, you can't all of a sudden, you can't spend your whole life walking around and you come to a door and go, what's this? I need to learn what this is. Right? Our brains build models of the world. Right? So they have pre-existing models of the world, but not just of the world, but are models of the world. Because remember, our brain's purpose is to keep us alive. So the brain's model of the world is not of the world, but it's of the world in relation to our survival in the world. Right? And so our brains don't ever attempt to be objective. Right? They attempt to keep us alive. It's what's practical. So our brains are inherently about practicality rather than correctness. So they develop these models, and these model characteristics. These models are, when I say they're hierarchical, that means we have models of. I've got a glass of water here. You can't see, but if I put my hand out, my model of the world includes that if I move my arm like this, that I can bring water. I can get a glass of water and drink it. But your model of the world is also that if you save a lot of money, I use this example, a lot of money now, then you'll have enough money for your retirement. Right? Our models of the world are from the very, very, very small things to long-term future. It's everything. They're not memories. These are dynamic, predictive. They try to bring out patterns and principles and a hypothesis about the way the world works, which is constantly being updated. And these models they're not passive, they're predicting how they expect the world to work, right? This is really important, that our models, based on their experience, they're making assumptions about, okay, my model of the world tells me that this will happen, right? And so they're predicting consequences. And we're not aware of our models. We think we're just, we're all objective, right? But actually, we all are working on the basis of models. All of us in this workshop, right? We have existing models of the world, not just something we keep in our pocket, but it's everything, all encompassing. Where do these models come from? From our biology, right? We need, part of our model is that we need to eat. They're not just mental models, they're embodied models of us. We need to eat. We need to sleep. This is part of our model of the world. From our culture, from our experience. And all of this comes together in our models. Any questions on this? Do jump in if this makes sense or doesn't make sense. So this is quite important here, that these models, because what we're saying here is our models are essentially, these are the exploitation, right? This is what we know already. Eda, please.
Thank you. I was wondering what hierarchical mean. Maybe I missed that part in the characteristics.
That's fine. Hierarchical, meaning that they work at very different levels as well. So you will have and time frame. So you will have a model of the world. At the lower level, you will have, I don't know, I've got a pen in my hand. My model of the world is gravity. If I drop it, it will fall down, right? But also, my model of the world includes my values and my beliefs or not in God or whatever, right? So it goes from much more low level type of understanding through to big picture frameworks and ideas, right? And also it's hierarchical in a time sense. As I said before, if I scratch my nose like this is I get immediate feedback from it, but also over the long term, I can plan my pension fund, right? So these are very different levels of and so it's hierarchical in terms of there's many different kind of like levels of this. Sorry, so that means that we already have Sawyer. That means Soraya said in the chat, that means that we already have established models and we take decisions based on those. Absolutely. And what we're saying is in fact, you can't take a decision based on anything else, right? I mean, all you can take you can only take your decisions based on your model, right? And your model will drive all of your decisions, right? And so what this is saying, but we'll get to this, but what it's saying is is there's no such thing as a bad decision or a bad action. I shouldn't use the word bad. Adaptive, right? Helpful. There's no such thing as a good or a bad or helpful or unhelpful action or decision. All there is a good or bad or helpful or unhelpful model, right? Because we can't act outside of our model. Now we'll get in, I mean, there are ways we can change this, and the whole point of this workshop is how we can then act outside of our model, right? I mean, this is where we're going. So you don't need to give up and go, oh no, look, this sounds like bad news, right? The whole point is how can we get beyond our model? because that's what innovation is. If you think about it, innovation is that precisely what it is to expand our model.
Ben, if I may say something, I don't know how to raise my
Please.
hand. I'm sorry.
Please. Yeah, I had the same problem with that. Please.
Thanks for this. Isn't very interesting. Maybe just to give it, I'm asking really to give it content. What you're talking about, what's the brain is in the box, is really what we have as our understanding of what the world is, which is based on our family, our culture, our background. These things limit our, all our decisions are made within that context of what we know, which is where we are, what we, that's the limitation, that's the box. So if I come from a very poor household in Africa, I will have my limitations based on all of these considerations or limitations of my surroundings. And so if I'm a person from a higher income country and a higher class level in society, then my decision making is very different. So that's what I just wanted to ask.
I'm absolutely saying that. I'm absolutely saying that. And I'm saying I'm going even further, right? And saying that it's not just our decision making which is in a box, but our brains are literally in a box, right? Our skulls, it's dark in there, right? I mean, our brains, these sort of like these 100 billion neurons, right? They exist in a box, in bone inside our skulls. They do not have access to the external world, right? All we have access to is sensory data, which gets turned into electrical signals in our brains. That's what our brains work on, right? And so there's that box, but there's also the boxes you're talking about of culture. But it's also going to be it's also biology, right? I mean, it's not just our experience. There's a lot of work done on us v them, right? This basic biological distinction between what's me and what's something else, and about why that causes conflict. Right, and that has all sorts of implications in terms of racism, in terms of acceptance of others. A lot of this stuff goes back to biology, and actually, for example, one of a very basic level, our most fundamental level of us v them, is our immune system. Right? I mean, here's an example of hierarchical. Right? Our immune system is right. It's like this is the ultimate. This is me, and this is something outside is harmful, good or bad. I need to make these decisions, and so even our immune system is part of that model. Right? It's like the model is hierarchical. It's all the way up, and it's not that we have this model in our pocket, right? And it's our model. Even our sense of us is part of the model, right? But that's going off in a slightly different direction. But the model is all encompassing, right? But we think we experience stuff as if it's real, and it's like, no, we do not experience it as real. What we experience is our model of the world. Right? And we can't experience anything else because if we did, then it would be part of our model. Right? Let me carry on a little bit more. So I would like just to wrap up on this section before we take a break. Sorry if Maria, I hope that answered the question to some degree. Okay. But remember, so all brains are working to operate or minimize their uncertainty between our model and the world itself. Right? That's the operating principle. That's what brains do. Right? And so they're looking for uncertainty. They're looking to resolve conflicts or gaps between its model and the sensory data which is coming in. Because if the sensory data which is coming in doesn't match the model well, there's a problem, right? And that's what they're trying to do. They're not looking for accuracy, they're looking for certainty, right? Or resolving conflict. And you can see this in a very, very simple example here, right? So if you think about it, all that's coming in, all that's happening is that there's light waves coming into your eyes, right? That's what it is. This is what this picture is. But if you look at these steps, you either see them going up or hanging down. And if you stare at this, you cannot hold it. It will always change within 10 seconds. Right? You can't keep it. That's because the data is ambiguous, right, in the world. And it's your brain is trying to make sense of it. It can't be two things at the same time for your brain. Right? One person, I've done this with many people, and only one person I've had said, "Oh, for me it doesn't change," and he had done boxing for years, and he got quite worried about this during the session. He was like, "Oh my God, there's something wrong with me," right? So anyway, but you can see just at that basic level that it's trying to make your brain is completely, you're not aware of it, right? You don't feel when it switches, it just switches, and this is going on. Here, another one, and you have ambiguity, right? This can have more than one meaning. Is this a rabbit or a duck? Right? It can't be both at the same time. You can't see a rabbit and a duck, right? But it could be either. And of course, it's neither. It's just black and white lines, right? And we've completely given it the meaning of it's a duck or a rabbit. This is your model. And if you lived in a country where you'd never seen a rabbit, it would only be a duck. Right? I mean, this is your model. It's your model that is seeing these lines. It's not the lines themselves. So the lines themselves don't mean anything. They're just lines. So you go, all right, so what? This is kind of interesting. Duck, rabbit, we've seen these like little illusions, not important. Well, it is important, right? First of all, you can see that we're having to give everything certainty. We're going into exploitation. We're narrowing down meaning rather than exploring what it could be. You can already see this process happening. But also, it doesn't just happen with optical illusions. It happens with everything else. Look, here we've got some lines and colors. All right. But watch what happens. Remember, all you're seeing is your retina is seeing lines and colors, like the duck and this, right? I'm British, right? Okay, so now you see a flag. But actually, we don't just see a flag. You see a flag, you see meaning, right? For some people, it might be, okay, great, BBC World Service. Other people, it might be memories of slavery and colonization. Right? It means very, very different things. For some people, they want to burn this as soon as they see this. For other people, this is a source of their whole motivation in life is to defend it. All of this ultimately coming from lines and colors, right? And so this stuff has it matters. It's not just a theoretical, oh yeah, interest. It really has importance, right? Another thing is our brains are having to make sense of the world here, right? You're getting similar data. You can see grass and there's brown lines, right? It's the same kind of data coming in, but it can come from different sources, right? I did this recently with somebody, and it was the first person I'd ever seen who saw it as a snake. She lived in Florida. All right. So context matters. Her model was see brown things, brown lines in grass, snake. possibly, right? That was her model. And so we're constantly, we're seeing this this stuff in terms of our models. I don't know if I've really got time to show this video. Okay, I'll just do this very quickly. I need to just actually, if I share this, I need to share it with sound. But it's not just with what we see, right, that we're trying to make sense of stuff. It's with all of our senses. So watch this briefly.
At any one moment, we are
Sorry.
by sensory information. Our brains do a remarkable job of making sense of it all. It seems easy enough to separate the sounds we hear from the sights we see. But there is one illusion that reveals this isn't always the case.
Ba, ba, ba.
Have a look at this. What do you hear?
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba.
But look what happens when we change the picture.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. Ba.
And yet, the sound hasn't changed. In every clip, you are only ever hearing ba with a B.
Ba, ba. Ba,
It's an illusion known as the McGurk effect.
ba,
Take another look.
ba,
Concentrate first on the right of the screen.
ba,
Now to the left of the screen.
ba.
The illusion occurs because what you are seeing clashes with what you are hearing.
In the illusion,
So on this, right, it's just trying to make the point. It's not just about lines. We're constantly from sensory data, we are making these judgments. And in this case, our visual data, when it contradicts the sound, our visual data wins, right? And as we've seen, and there might be times when it's the other way around, and this will happen with all of our senses. I'm just really trying to emphasize that we are constantly making sense of the world within our model of what our expectations are of the world, right? And even if this is going into a lot of depth, I hope it's kind of becoming a little bit clear that this is really important when we want to think differently and think about innovative ways of thinking, is that we need to fundamentally be aware of just how strong our models really are, because most of us are not aware of it, right, on a day-to-day basis. We're going to take a break in just a minute, but are there any questions or comments? I know this is a lot, but please, Felipe, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just curious, just given the illusion that we've seen, it seems like the visual was prioritized over the audio, right? Like the auditory sense. Is there kind of a hierarchy or something in senses that I'm not aware of?
We're very visual. Look, we are very visual creatures, right? And yeah, we have remarkably good vision as humans, and yeah. So in this case, it's prioritized. I'm sure there are many examples of times when sound overrides visual, right? And obviously for blind people or deaf people, it's all going to make way, do work in different ways. And some people are more visually oriented, some people more auditory. It varies. But in this case, and there is if you're interested in sensory information, there's an absolutely remarkable book about how animals and life, about sensory data, and about how it's just so wildly and astonishingly different throughout the animal kingdom, right? And in ways you can't possibly imagine, right? It's a fantastic book, which I'm happy to share the title with if you want, right? Okay. Any other comments, questions? Is this making sense? Yeah, I hope. Okay. I will share the title. So let's take a break for 5 minutes. So it's 4:10 my point. So let's come back at let's be generous. Let's make it 6, yeah, and come back at 4:15. Okay, see you in a couple of minutes. Okay. Hi, I hope people have a nice little break. Any comments, questions, suggestions before we move on? It's a lot to take in, yeah, or not? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's but
Hi, Ben.
yeah, please.
It is a lot, but it's fascinating. I was just wondering, maybe it's too early. Maybe we'll get this next session. Like to come to a place where you're aware of all the different things that you were talking about in the moment, and you know, for professionals working in the field of food systems, we're always action oriented. People want things to be instrumental. I was just wondering, like, I personally see that as a bit of a paradox because you can't really be innovative when you're in that mode of urgency. So, like, what have you got to say to that? Because
Jim's
like,
you've done it again. You've done it again. You've like you've predicted exactly where we're going. It's all of it's next week. It's all about that. It's essentially, yeah. Again, is it this time? It's probably not 100% about it. It's probably about 95% about it. But it's all about how can you stay in an innovative space, right? When you have these demands for practicality, you know, don't be too philosophical. We need action. We've got to do this. We've got to respond to the email. We've got to deliver that. And it's all about how can we stay in a space where we can still be creative within that pressure. Right. So we're coming there, right? That's where we're going. We'll spend almost all the time on next week talking about that. Because I think this is I mean, to me, this is far more important. Being able to do exactly what you're saying, it's far more important than learning another technique about how to be creative. All right, and learning 10 uses of a banana and a lamp. If you put them together, find out 10 ways that you can creatively use them. I mean, that's fine, but real creativity and innovation is about something much deeper than that. It's about a way of life and a way of thinking, right? And I agree with you that it's all about how do you find that space where you can balance the demands with staying in that space. And hopefully we'll explore that right next time. But I'm gonna I know that I'm talking a lot here, and I promise next week I won't be quite so much. But I'm repeating the reason I'm doing it is I personally find it really important to get to grips with the underlying premise rather than just going on to tools and techniques and a little bit of fun and magic and whatever. So really trying to go into the underlying principle as to our models. And so I am going to carry on with this, and you can interrupt at any time. Am I here or here? Now, at this point, you might be going, all right, so we know all about our models, but if they're so strong, how do we change them? Right? Are we just prisoners of our models? And the answer is, remember that these models are dynamic, right? They're not memories. Memories are part of them. They're constantly trying to update themselves. And we're going to explore how they do this. So remember that the way that the world, that we make sense of the world, the only way we can make sense of the world or understand the world is through our sensory data. Right? I mean, that's how we have access to the world. And we have predictions about the world. So I have a prediction, a sensory prediction, that if I pick up my glass, I'm going to feel it's a bit colder, the water. I have a sensory prediction as to what I'm going to feel if I pick up this, if I move my hand out here. I have a prediction as to what this glass is going to what it's going to feel like when I pick it up. If I play tennis, does anybody play tennis? How do you know that you hit the ball? How would you know if you hit the tennis ball? You would feel it in your arm. You would see it with your vision. You would hear the sound. Yeah, right. In other words, what you're actually trying to do, I know this might sound a bit weird, but this is demonstrated. What you're actually trying to, you're not actually trying to hit the ball. What you're trying to do is you're trying to create your brain is trying to fulfill its sensory predictions as to what hitting the ball would sound like, feel like, look like. Right? And this goes a little bit through to this question. I think, Edda, you asked about hierarchy before. A hierarchy is maybe winning a tennis tournament, but a lower thing is, what does it feel like to hit? What would be the sound when I hit a winning shot? Right? It's again this hierarchy of prediction, and so your brain is making these constant predictions, and what it's trying to do is it's trying to match up the predictions from its model with the data coming from the world, right? And when it does that, the model is reinforced. Great, my model is right, right? And it does this is really important, automatically, right? Automatically, we're not aware of it. But what happens when our sensory predictions, and again, hierarchical, it might be short-term or it might be long-term, bigger stuff. What happens when our predictions do not match the world? We get a prediction error, uncertainty, right? So our model of the world is no longer matching the sensory data coming in from the world. In other words, we've got uncertainty. And remember, all brains operate to minimize their uncertainty or surprise between their pre-existing model of the world and the world itself. So this here is the critical component. And our brains naturally are trying to reduce this. But as we will see, it's precisely here where we have the opportunity for learning and acting innovatively. Right? This is the big paradox. Right? So how do we reduce uncertainty? It's not about, so the brain is not after truth about the world. It's after practical survival, because that's what the brain does. It's about survival, right? It's not after objective truth. It's after what's useful, not what's right. Or at least that's its operating principle. So how do you reduce the uncertainty? There's two ways you can reduce the uncertainty. Let me check on the time here. Yeah, we're okay. There's only two ways that you can reduce the uncertainty. You can change the model. In other words, you can update your model, or you can change the world so that it produces the sensory data to fit your model. Right? And you're probably at this stage going, what the hell does this mean? How does this work? Well, let's use a very trivial example, right? A very trivial example. Imagine that your model of the world, for some reason, right? Your model of the world is that there are always apples on the kitchen table, right? So what is your prediction? What would be your sense? What would when you walk into the kitchen, what would be the prediction that your model would make of the sensory data? You don't need to type it. Somebody can just shout out if you want to.
You ate all your apples.
No, but no, if the model, yeah, but even going back before that, we're not looking for an explanation as to why there are no apples on there. We're just looking about if the model is, I walk into my kitchen, but my model says that there are always apples on the table. What sensory data would I expect to see? Well, I've given it away, haven't I? Apples.
You want to see apples.
You would expect your brain would be predicting that it was seeing little red round things or green things at a certain wavelength coming into, that's what the prediction would be. So the expectation in the model is that there are always apples on the kitchen table. So you would have a sensory prediction from your model of seeing little red things in a bowl, right? And there's two ways you can resolve this uncertainty, right? And if there aren't any apples on, so here it's walking in and there aren't any apples on the table. The first thing it can do is it can learn. So you can update your model. You can go, actually, the way the world works is there are sometimes apples on my kitchen table. Or there are always apples on my kitchen table except for on Monday afternoons when I walk in, right? So you can learn. Yeah? Is this making sense? And the other way you can resolve the uncertainty is to do what? Remember, we said that there are two things you can do. You can either change the model or you can act to change the world. So here you've changed the model, you've updated your model, you've learned. What's the other thing you can do to reduce the uncertainty? How would you change the world here?
Come home after buying some apples to make sure there are some in the kitchen. Like, make sure you get
Put some
apples every
apples
time
on
you
the
come in.
table. Yeah, I mean, I cut out the going shopping and whatever, but you're right. Put the apples on the table, right? So you can either learn or you update your model. Sorry, you can either you either update your model or you act, right? But it's only in the fact that that there was a contradiction between your expectations and the apples. That was the only space which gives you the opportunity to either learn or to act, right? Because if you walk in and there are apples on the table, here, your model is reinforced. There's nothing to do. Great, on automatic pilot. Everything that I know about the world is true, right? Whereas here, you've got a contradiction and an uncertainty, and you have to change. You have to act. And now we're using a trivial, silly example of apples on the table. But remember, right, we take sensory data and we make big picture issues about it. We bring up big concepts and it's the way we act. So this is important. But there's another thing here, which is what? There's another alternative here. Well, ignore the fact that there aren't any apples on the table, just don't notice it. All right? I mean, that's another alternative. All right? In other words, we don't think it's relevant in this situation. I'm walking in, I'm looking for my notebook or whatever, I'm looking for my phone, or I'm looking for biscuits rather than apples. So I don't pay attention to this data, right? And if you don't pay attention to the data, then there's no error to correct. Does that make sense? You haven't created it's not about whether the apples are there, it's whether you notice the apples are there, right? So here, if you ignore something, then you're not creating a prediction error, and therefore you've got no space to act. Think of climate change, all right? I don't have to act because I ignore the fact that there's climate change, or I explain it away. I explain away the script by saying, "Oh, I don't trust scientists." Right? I mean, but you have to explain away at some level that uncertainty, right? And it's again saying this isn't a theoretical thing, that this is the fundamental operating mechanism of the brain, and therefore of us, right? So this is really important here, because even though the thing is to reduce the uncertainty, it's only in the uncertainty that it provides us the opportunity for something new, right? In other words, what we pay attention to matters immensely, right? I mean, there's billions of pieces of information, even though you're not aware of it. In the room that you're sitting in, there's billions of pieces of information that you could be paying attention to, right? And your brain is selecting out what it thinks is important. You're not aware of it, but it's happening. If you pay attention to it, some of you maybe in the background, you can hear if you pay attention to it, maybe there's some traffic you can hear, or kids running around, or maybe your fridge makes a noise. Or if you've got a window open, maybe there are some birds that you can hear. Right? There's all of this stuff going on around us, or maybe if you become aware of the fact that of your foot on the ground, right? You can become aware of your foot on the ground. All of this stuff was going on, right? Your foot was always on the ground, but now I've said pay attention to it. Your attention has gone on to the feeling of your foot on the ground. So there's all of this stuff going on all around us, right? I can say pay attention to your heartbeat, right? There's all of this data coming in, and we are selecting, cutting, going, this is what's important, right? And we're doing it automatically according to what our models think is important. So it's our models which determine this is relevant, this is not relevant. So in other words, so our brains are always asking this question: how important is this data or this information in this context for this task? So what you pay attention to is absolutely critical for innovation, right? It's everything. And we need to try to be a bit deliberate about that. The last thing before we do a little exercise here, and this is where we're going, Kim Saw, like you've already predicted this. When we talk about uncertainty, it sounds like a bad thing, right? But there's at least two types of uncertainty. There's one where we feel stressed, worried. Oh my God, what's the future hold? What's this meeting gonna happen? And it's draining, it's exhausting, right? This stress of where we have uncertainty and threat, fear, and worry. And we kind of quite often have this, even if we're not aware of it. It's an underlying kind of thing. It's an uncertain. I've got to control this. I've got to do this or whatever. But there's another type of uncertainty, and so And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to close the error prediction, but in a kind of like, oh, we've got to control it kind of way. But there's another type of uncertainty, which is exactly the opposite. It's excited, it's anticipation, it's curiosity, right? It's like, what's going to happen? The world is an open, it's basically starting off with the premise of the world is an open, flexible, exciting place, right? I might not like everything about it, but there's that space where actually searching for what's new and looking at new things and focusing on what I don't know is kind of nice, to focus on what I don't know rather than just repeating all the crap that we do know. Right? Sorry, excuse my French there, right? And so this, in a sense, Kim Saw, is what you were talking about, right? In a sense, right? We're going to get to. And what we're going to be focusing on next week, in fact, for the whole time, is essentially how do we exist in this space rather than this space? And that's not saying that you can't be creative in this space. You can be. Under stress, all of us have had this. Well, I ask you, have you ever had this, that you've been putting off a piece of work for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and then suddenly 3 hours before the deadline, you can all of a sudden you can do it, right? So stress, worry, fear, it can make you very creative, but it's going to be kind of more of the exploitative rather than this here. You can already see it. Look here, the fear, worry, threat is the exploitative type, and this is the explorative type, right? So all the exercises next week are going to be about trying to go into this I'm pointing as if you can see where my finger's going. It's going to be about going into here, right? And so what I'm trying to say is that the state that you're in is going to be massively important as to the options that you see in a situation, right? And the options that you see in a situation are always more than you're aware of, always, right? There's always more options than you're aware of, maybe good, maybe bad, but and the options which you're aware of are going to determine how they're going to provide the framework as to how creative or innovative you can be. So if you're not aware of any options, then you're obviously not going to be innovative or creative. But rather than just talking about that more, I would like to do a little exercise with you all, right? To kind of to bring this last point home about how your state is really important for finding solutions. You up for that little exercise? Okay. Now I'm going to ask you to close your eyes in a minute, all right? And the reason that I'm going to ask you to close your eyes is not because there's any weird stuff, right? It's just that when you close your eyes, we take in so much visual data, right? That actually, this is really interesting. When you close your eyes, you're going completely into your model, right? You're not actually getting any data from the outside world, right? And actually, when we'll talk about this next week, when you dream, you're updating your model. Essentially, that's what you're doing. That's what dreams do. It's your model is trying to resolve stuff, right? It's all internal model. And now here, when you close your eyes, you're going into your internal model. And and I would like to ask you to do this exercise. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and imagine something. And I'll let me open your eyes one last time just beforehand, because there's one English word here which you need to be aware of. Do you remember this? You all know about pirates. You got them, rather than just killing the ones who they didn't like, they made them walk the plank of wood and go into the sea. This is a plank, right? And I just use that because it's not necessarily a common word in English, a plank. And what we're going to do is we're going to be walking the plank, but it will all be fine. Nobody will get injured, all right? But I will ask you to close your eyes now and keep your eyes closed. And I will ask you to imagine some things. And it doesn't matter if you do it right. It doesn't matter if you don't understand my instructions exactly. You will all do it how you want to do it anyway, right? So just enjoy the ride, right? So I'd ask you all to close your eyes now, and do turn off your camera if you want, because I know for some people they find it a bit odd to have that somebody can look at them while they've got their eyes closed. Yeah, you're all shy. I'm going to turn off my camera as well, because it's not fair if okay. So I would like you to imagine that in the room that you're in, there's a plank of wood on the floor. But it's not exactly on the floor, because raised at either side are 2 or 3 bricks. So it's a bit off the floor. And I would like you now to walk across, stand on that plank of wood and walk along it. Imagine yourself walking along that plank of wood. And now I'd like you to imagine that you're standing on top of a huge, huge high skyscraper, maybe in New York or somewhere like that. And connecting you, this skyscraper, and the neighboring skyscraper is a plank of wood. I'd like you to walk along that plank of wood to the neighboring skyscraper. And don't look down, it's awfully high up there. If you find this difficult, don't worry, because help is at hand. Standing next to you is Superman or Wonder Woman. And I want you to reach out and pull Superman or Wonder Woman or both of them into your body. And as you do that, you take on their powers, and you don't have to walk across that plank of wood. You can run and jump across to the neighboring skyscraper and run across the roof and jump to the next skyscraper. And you can run across the skyline, and you can fly and do backflips and somersaults as you go across the skyline, enjoying your new superpowers. And now you come back and you can walk across that plank of wood. And now you can come back and open your eyes and turn on your video cameras if you want. Now, what happened? What happened? Okay, nobody wants to say it, so I will guess, I will give it a go. That you found it fairly, if you could imagine stuff, you found it fairly easy to walk across the plank in your room, right? You get up on top of the skyscraper and it's like, huh? I've got to walk across a plank of wood, right? And many of you probably even physically felt it, right? Often people, they're like, right? I can't do this. All this was just in your head, remember, right? Talk about embodied models, right? Just your imagination, you're already physically kind of like feeling it from a picture, right? But then you took on Superman or Wonder Woman's powers, and all of a sudden it was fine, easy, whatever, right? And then you could walk across the bridge, right? Something like that happened to you? Yeah. All of this just in our imagination, right? And I'm not suggesting that you spend your life, walking around thinking of yourself as as Superman or Wonder Woman. Why not, if that's what turns you on? But anyway, but the point is that the state you're in, right, the internal state of your model fundamentally affects the options that you see in the world, because nothing changed about the situation that it was a plank of wood which you had to walk across between skyscrapers. That situation did not change. The only thing which changed in this scenario was your internal state, right, as to what you think you could do in the world, which changed all the options that you saw which were available. Right? Your internal state, so your imagination, right? You thought yourself as having the powers of Superman, Wonder Woman, changed the situation fundamentally, even though the situation didn't change. Right? And again, I'm not suggesting that we all think of ourselves as Superman or Wonder Woman, right? I'm saying that our internal state of mind, right, our internal model, because this was all our model, fundamentally affects how we see the world. So if we really want to innovate, actually a lot of it's about innovating on ourselves as to how we view the world. Right? It's innovating in terms of the way we see the world is really where that's what is going to present us with the options to act differently. Right? And so we're saying here that our internal model, we're gonna when what we're going to be wanting to do is we're going to be doing this in next week, spending the whole time doing it, is about how we create these prediction errors, right, between our model and the world, because that's the space where we can act and learn, but we remain in a creative mindset or a creative inner state, right? And it's actually surprisingly easy. Some of the exercises we'll do next week, you'll be like, what? But you'll it's actually, it's much easier to change your state and to be in a creative state than to change your thoughts about stuff. It's actually easier to change the underlying state. And just one final thing here. This state that you're in will, if you know, whether you're looking to do food waste or about how to bring up children better, or to do painting, or to do better work with community meetings, right? Your internal state, in other words, your model of the world, so your expectations of the world, is the absolute key to how we can act more innovatively, which is exactly the opposite to what we're taught, which is always like action, 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 action. It's all about what's changed in the world, right? But it's really not that. And you can already see that this state of a more fluid state is more about, it enables you to be more confident with the exploring things rather than just the exploiting. Right. Now that's for today. I think we're kind of like it's probably a lot to take in, or maybe you're all like bored by this, I don't know, or whatever. But we've got a couple of minutes, of 5 minutes or so, for any comments, questions, anything to discuss. Please, yeah, just jump in. You don't need to raise your hand.
Okay. I have a question about based on the previous topic about the apples in the kitchen and uncertainty. Sometimes we may change the setup in our house completely, and we can notice that our brain was used to the previous context, and like we have a bit of trouble in adapting or getting used to the new way. But I find personally that there's something nice in that, like in the new. But some people are really disturbed in changing and in having a new setup visually around us. How that kind of changes, like simple changes in our world, like changing where the sofa is, influences our brain. Like, does it have a positive influence? Does it trigger something?
Absolutely, totally. I mean, positive or negative. I mean, one thing Camilla said, I should have mentioned before. By the way, there's no right or wrong answer as to whether you should put the apple on the table or update. Either is fine, right? No, absolutely, it changes our brains, right? Because we pay attention to it, right? To the changes, and then this makes us think differently. But also, as people, but as you say, for some people, it's not a good thing, right? But it goes even deeper. This notion of change, Ella. Is anybody aware of eye saccades? Do you know what I mean by eye saccades? A saccade in your eye. Your eyes, right, uh, crazy as it sounds, are moving like this 5 times a second, right? You're not aware of it. Look it up if you don't believe me, right? Right. And the reason is because you have to keep on refreshing the data, because your brain is looking for what's new. It's looking for the difference, for the new, for the information coming in the world. And if it's static, right? Your eyes, it's this physical. We think it's all, as you say, rearranging your house or going on exotic holidays and whatever. It's true, but this is a hierarchical thing. You create surprise by rearranging your furniture, but you also create surprise by moving your eyes a little bit 5 times a second, because you have the possibility for taking in new information, right? And it's because your brain is constantly looking for resolving stuff, and if it doesn't see anything more, it will just go into its model. So I hope this is answering your question, that absolutely it does this. And I was recently I recently did a not with somebody here, so I won't give any names, nobody within facts, but on a different thing. I did some coaching with somebody on an individual session um, who had got some very sort of like traumatic news, right? And it was like a year ago on through a computer call, right? It was a whole load of things, actually, work, personal, whatever. And she was like in a bad way, and it was quite clear. The first thing was, move your bloody computer, right? Because every time she comes into the thing, she sits down, right, and is sitting in the same chair, looking at the same computer screen, turning on the same thing, and it's completely just, even not aware of it, it's completely just bringing back, there's a part of the brain which is just associated with it there. And so this point about moving your furniture, my wife does it all the time. It drives me nuts. So there you go. But she seems to like it. So yeah, change your environment. Go. That's why people go on holidays and whatever. But we will be looking at techniques as to how you can get new stuff even when you don't move your house or move your furniture around or go on holiday or have new food. Right? It's yeah. Sorry, that was a very long answer. Any other comments or questions? No. Okay. And no, this guy Carl Friston, his work is quite it's even if he's not a household name now, he's also very much behind. He's very much a leading thinker in artificial intelligence in the world. I mean, he's really quite heavily involved in that, and actually trying to build something completely different to current artificial intelligence, which is much more based around this whole notion of because sorry, I've got 1 minute, I think, Alexander, just to say this, because one of the things about artificial intelligence is that it's a static model of the world, right? It doesn't have its own model of the world. There's no it's not embodied. It's just a series of it's data sets about the world. It's not of itself in the world, which is the big difference to human intelligence, is that our brains, our models are not of the world, but they're of ourselves in the world, right? It's embodied, so we can act and test the world through learning or action. Artificial intelligence can't do that. Biological intelligence does, right? And this is the really big thing, and this is what Friston is I think is critically important, is trying to, because these chat GPT, large language models, they are only a prediction, a statistical prediction of the next, in English, like U always comes after Q, right? Or Q is always followed by U. Large language models, they're essentially that on a big scale. They're just statistical predictions of what words will come next in a very hierarchical thing. There's no action, there's no model, there's no internal thing. So this stuff that we're talking about is actually quite it's quite relevant to where we're actually going, I think, as humanity, but that's another point. Any other comments or questions? Is it interesting? I don't know. It's like, is it? I hope you found it worth your time to spend this. But next week it will be much more exercises. Yeah. Okay. Alexandra, please.
Thank you, Ben. Very fascinating. I also realized that there is a lot of content that's not new for me, because I'm participating in the different iterations of the events. But I always find it interesting that there are things that I forget about, and like reminding ourselves constantly about certain things. So yes, the power of repetition, basically. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And we hope to see you next week. So next week on the 27th, same time, 3 p.m. CET, 9 a.m. Panama time. And if you have any further questions or reflections or comments, please feel free to get directly in touch with Ben. So in the chat box here, I am sharing Ben's email, but also visit us on the Fax Community digital platform. Some of you are already members, others not yet. So please join us there. So yes, wishing everyone a good rest of your afternoon or morning or evening, depending where you are joining us from today, and see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks, bye, and hope to see you next week. Bye.